Hello, welcome to this video on CMI Assignment 501. This is the third part, and I will be talking through assessment criteria 1.3, which asks us to think about the impact of organizational structures on the management role. So still within task one, our third assessment criteria, examine the impact of organizational structures on management roles. So for this, I think we need to define what we mean by organizational structures, perhaps give a couple of examples and look at how the two different examples might impact the role of a manager in the organization. So in this video, I'll just give a couple of the simplest examples, I think, and some thoughts on how you might approach this. Again, these are just suggestions, and you'll have your own thoughts on this. So we've got the word examine. So just quickly whiz back to the question. There we go. So examine the impact of organizational structures. So examine, what does the CMI mean by that? It means we need to inspect something thoroughly in order to determine its nature or condition. So we need to examine organizational structures. And again, I've got two, I think, for this little video. Back to Forbes, they have been quite good actually as a reference point. I've used them a little bit already in the last video. So what do we mean by organizational structures? The organizational structure, oh, I've got a Z there, so it must be American, never mind. The organizational structure is how the company delegates roles, responsibilities, job functions, accountability, and decision-making authority. So it's kind of like, yeah, the structure by which, how the organization works, how does it function? The organizational structure often shows the chain of command and how information moves within the company. Yeah. So there are many, so the two that I've gone with are, again, just to keep it really nice and simple, I think there's a real benefit to that actually. So the hierarchical structure versus the flat structure. So what might be the differences between the two? So a hierarchical structure will have multiple layers. You know what they're like, these hierarchical places, you've got lots of ranks. You've got kind of, let's say the army would be a good example. You've got private, lance corporal, corporal, sergeant, warrant officer, and then, second lieutenant, captain, and major, and blah, blah, blah. So onwards we go. So hierarchical structure will have a lot of ranks and grades, a real structure. Universities tend to be very hierarchical, don't they? Everyone's got their grade, and goodness me, they like to tell you about it. The public sector often has, because of the complexity of the organization, they often have lots of layers and grades that go with it. With that, we'll often go a degree of clarity. So these organizations have clear lines of communication, hence that thing of the chain of command, so that, if you need support or help with something, it's clear who you go to speak to, the person who's one level up, and if you've got to pass information down, then you pass it to the level down. So there's clarity about how communication works. So quite structured. They're likely to be defined roles and responsibilities. So again, in hierarchical structures, you'll probably find that people have fairly well-defined job specs and boundaries, and it's sort of like when you go out of that, that's where you need to go to the level up to seek permission or to pass things up the chain. With that also, it can be, can be a little bit controlled. So there may be layers to work through to influence change or make significant decisions. So if you want to make things happen, it might be that you need to engage your boss and then your boss's boss in order to, if you like, build a guiding coalition to make things happen. So in order to influence change, it might be quite difficult if you're lower in the organization because you've got all of those different layers above you to get to the real decision makers who can actually make things happen. So you might need to work patiently. It might take time to build those networks in order to make things happen. But what you also get is a clearly defined pathway for careers. So, I mean, not always, but usually within a hierarchical structure, it would normally be the case that you would work through the ranks. So that, progression means getting to the next level. If you're a grade 7, progression would probably mean going for a grade 8 role, that type of thing. So you've got that kind of clarity in terms of being able to plan for a career, and you've got a degree of certainty in terms of what you need to do next. So there we go. That's hierarchical structure. A few pros and cons. would say to being in a hierarchy. Much of it probably depend on your preferences, and if you like structure and certainty, then working in hierarchical organizations is likely to be a good thing. A flat structure, on the other hand, will be more agile and adaptable. So things moving fast. It may be possible for anybody to speak directly to the big boss. So all the bosses. So again, but there won't be the layers. It might be that you work in the same office as the boss, or in the same space. And or you could just pick up the phone to them and give them a call directly. Whereas you might not be able to do that if you're lower down in the hierarchy of a hierarchical organization. What you might find in a flat structure is that decisions can be made quickly and everyone will know straight away. So again, because there aren't the layers to work through, decision making probably happen a bit faster. There might be fewer people involved, and when decisions are made and information's passed, there might only be one or two levels for that information to reach. So things just, the way that information flows, the way that decisions are made, everything, it may well happen a bit faster, so that when the business sees opportunities, it can go for them much more quickly. You don't necessarily need to align stakeholders and get the right people on board first. You can make things happen a bit more quickly. With that, it means there can be a bit less clarity. So it may be that roles aren't as clearly defined. That says everybody does everything. So everybody kind of rolls up their sleeves and mucks in. So, and again, if you are somebody who really likes freedom and flexibility and autonomy, you might quite like working in this flat structure. But, it can be a little bit chaotic. It's often the case that startups are very flat and fast paced. So yeah, that kind of startup culture, new businesses, new organizations, where things are happening fast, people are in a hurry, you haven't got bureaucracy and structure yet, which means that things can be a little bit risky. Decisions might get made very quickly. So we're not necessarily doing our due diligence and risk management in the way that you would in a more structured or more hierarchical or traditional type of organizational structure. You get with all of this high levels of autonomy, but maybe a bit less clarity on career paths. So again, it's not always going to be clear what you need to do in order to progress. It might just mean taking on more responsibility and that sort of thing. But you won't necessarily have grades or ranks to work through in this more kind of entrepreneurial, flat business model. So, a couple of questions just to finish with. How would you define your organization structure? So, what would this look like in your context? And, would you say you're hierarchical? Are you a flat structure? You can talk about other structures, if they're relevant to your organization. For example, a matrix structure where you have kind of a hierarchy, but also dotted lines to try and, I suppose, get agility working within larger or more complex organizations. So how would you define your organization structure? And then also the follow-up question that how does that impact your role? So what does it mean for you, your role as a manager? What's been your experience of working in that organizational structure, and what conclusions can you draw from that? There we go. And that is 1.3 complete. So hopefully not too complex, that one. As I said, I'd recommend, in summary, just defining what we mean by organizational structure, comparing to, and then just some thoughts on your organization and what it means for your role. Good. I hope that's been helpful. Thank you very much.